I'll never forget how much help I got through this journey. There's no way I would ever say that I could have done this by myself.
Welcome to Queries, Qualms, and Quirks, the weekly podcast that asks published authors to share their successful query letter and discuss their journey from first spark to day of publication. I am your host, Sarah Nicolas. I hope you're enjoying the podcast and the stories authors are sharing with you. If you are, please consider leaving a review on your podcast app or sharing the episode on social media. If you're interested in supporting the show with a couple bucks a month, go to patreon.com/pubtalklive. Today, you're going to hear from Laura Segal Stegman. LA-based arts publicist and author Laura Segal Stegman's middle grade debut, Summer of Luck, was released in September 2020 by Intense Publications and will be followed by a sequel in 2021. Her nonfiction credits include the travel book Only in New York. Her feature stories have appeared in Los Angeles Times and Westways magazine, among others. So please welcome Laura to the show. Hello.
Hi, I'm thrilled to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you agreed to come on. So let's go back to kind of the very beginning of your journey towards publication. When did you first start getting interested in writing, and how long did it take before you started getting serious about pursuing publication?
Well, my writer's story is rather lengthy. I'm a public relations consultant, and I always wrote in my work for that, bios and all kinds of different things. And I really loved telling stories. And one day in 2001, which now we're talking 20 years ago, I decided that I wanted to do something that wasn't to do with work, and I wanted it to be a creative thing, and I wanted to write a story, a book. And I knew nothing about any of that. But I had been a very voracious reader when I was a kid, and I loved middle grade books, and I still read some of them at the time and still do. And I thought, well, that'll be, that's what I want to do. I want to write a book for a kid that will make some kid today maybe feel the way I used to feel when I read those books. I started writing. The first draft took a while, maybe a couple of years, because I didn't do it full time. And when it was finished, I was like, this is great. I'm going to get published. I mean, it meant a lot to me, this story of these three kids finding their way to self-acceptance with the help of a ghost who haunts a magical carnival. That's basically what Summer of Luck is about. So I immediately sent it off to an agent. And, this was someone that I had some relationship with. And they wrote back and they said, they had someone in their office evaluate it, and it wasn't very positive. And so that sort of started me on this very lengthy journey. I'm the type of person that I want to do things by myself. It never would have occurred to me to do all the things I ended up doing later, like get help and find other writers to share my writing with. But it was very early on in the journey that I believed in the story that I wanted to tell, which of course changed with revision and revision and revision over the years. But that was pretty immediate.
How many revisions did you do? Do you know?
Probably 20 to 25. Because in the beginning, I was kind of editing more than revising, I think, in the beginning. In the context of my life and my work, I have a lot of contacts, and I had a contact with an agent probably 10 years into the story. And so the book was, written like, well, it wasn't that I didn't know how to write, but it wasn't necessarily written well for being a middle grade book, for kids who wouldn't have been interested in the adult points of view that I kept sticking into the story. He looked at it and he had it evaluated by someone in his office. And this time it was a little more positive, but he said to me, do you want to work with a development editor? And I was like, sure. I didn't know what a development editor was. And I just thought, I want to get better. I want this book I want to keep learning. I want it to get to a place where someone is going to be interested in publishing it. He hooked me up with this fantastic man who, we worked together over a period of a year, and I learned everything I know today about writing a novel from this man. He helped me realize, and see that the point of view thing that I had in there, where I had three kids' point of view, and I had probably like six adults.
Oh, wow.
I had all these side stories. With it takes place at a summer camp, and I had this side story where these two adult counselors were having a conflict, and how it was resolved. And it was like, he's like, this isn't going to work, and I'm like, really, I love that. So it had to go. There's
Hmm.
lots of pages on the cutting room floor from where it was at that point. He also brought me to how I could tell a story by showing and not telling. I mean, that was I don't even remember that he used those terms, but when I did hear those terms later on, I was like, I know how to do that. Writing fiction is completely different from the kind of writing I was doing, and I had no clue really. So I'm very grateful to having spent all that time doing that. And I kept believing in the book, and I stopped querying at that point. When we finished, I felt like, okay, this book is getting better. This book is good. Like, again, I had sort of a grandiose idea of what was going to sell, because I still didn't really know anything about the publishing world. I just was a better writer by then.
Hmm.
So at that point, I discovered the Twitterverse, the writing community on Twitter. I discovered Pitch Wars, which I had never heard of, and I realized that there was a lot of opportunity for me to find out a lot of stuff about publishing through these resources. And I love Twitter. I spent a lot of time reading it, but Twitter has really served me well, because I started applying to Pitch Wars, never got in, but I was lucky enough to apply to mentors who, some of them gave me feedback. So I started getting feedback from writers who were published, or writers who were going to be published, or writers who knew what they were doing, and people who knew way more about the publishing business than I did. And it was valuable. So, I know you asked me a question a while ago that I think I said, how many times has it been revised? It's been so many that I really could never even say,
Hmm.
because every time I would get some input from a mentor, like, or not that they were mentoring me per se, but someone who would give me feedback, I could see, oh, yeah, I need to adjust that. And the story of Summer of Luck, from where it was when I started to where it is today, the arc is the same, but the details of it have. Even the ending changed.
So, can you tell me about the moment that you realized that you wanted to be a published author?
I wanted to be a published author before I even started. I just thought that would be the coolest thing in the world, to write a book that would, feel to a kid today like the way my favorite middle grade books felt to me when I was growing up. To give something like that to a kid, that was gold. That was gold. When I was a kid, I read books that helped me see that things that I was going through, or things that I felt, or the way that I looked, that I wasn't alone. I never knew that until I found kids and stories in middle grade books that were just like me. And that's what I wanted to do. That's why I wanted to write a middle grade book. That's why I spent all the time that I spent. It wasn't my plan to make tons of money, and I haven't, but I really wanted to do it for the love of it. And that's what drove me, and has driven me, and has continued to drive me all these years.
I love hearing the answers to this question because I've been getting kind of a wide range of responses where you said that you wanted to be a published author before you wrote a book. And some people didn't realize that they wanted to be a published author until after they had written a book, which is just really fascinating.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, Twitter and Pitch Wars, and your contacts in the industry. Was there any other way that you started to learn about the publishing industry, like how it works, how to write a query, how to go about it, things like that?
Twitter was the gateway to people who were bloggers, people with talk shows like you. I mean, I came a little later to your show, but I started reading Agent Janet Reed's blog very early on and learning about query letters, which were harder to write query letters and log lines and things like that, harder than writing a book. I would see Janet Reed would have a list of her favorite blogs. So I would look those up and I'd start reading those. I tried to connect with and to learn from anybody that I could find. Twitter chats, Twitter pitch contests. I entered Pitch Wars probably 3 different years, I think. And each time I would get connected with some generous mentor who was willing to give me some feedback. So that was amazing. There's something called Right Mentor, or there was, I think there still is. And somebody requested my full. And it was like the first time that had ever happened, because agent responses at that point were like, no, thank you. This isn't for me. I felt like connecting with other writers like that was amazingly helpful.
Obviously, I agree. I love connecting with other writers.
Another blog is Janice Hardy's blog. She has this opportunity to connect with critique partners, and she has all kinds of great information. She was another one that was very notable in helping me find my way to other writing resources.
Yeah, Janice is great. Janice is actually the first writer that I read their book and then met them in person. She was doing the UCF Book Festival, and I had tweeted at her that I was excited to see her at it. And she recognized me from Twitter in the audience and, said hi. And then we ended up going to lunch together.
Wow.
It was just like the coolest thing. Like I was texting my sister, I'm at lunch with Janice Hardy. I was so excited.
Yeah, I know. I loved that you had her on your show recently, because I was like, I can't wait to hear what she had to say. And it was a good show. All of them are good shows.
Thank you. All right. So you started to get some feedback from Pitch Wars mentors and Write Mentor mentors and other people in the industry. So what happened after that? How did you get from that point to signing a book contract?
After I entered Pitch Wars, I also started entering other Twitter contests. Like, it was called Pitch Madness at the time, but it's like Pit Mad now, and things like that. Any opportunity to get feedback, that was really what I was looking for. I would post on writer con forums and things like that. I just wanted feedback more than anything. I also went back to querying, which was a really big mistake, because I never got any response. But after a while, I found two amazing critique partners, one of whom is still my critique partner today. The other one helped me, really a lot with a one time through with Summer of Luck. And I went through her book, and reading other people's books too was super helpful, because at that point I was still reading middle grade books from my childhood, which at that point was a really long time ago.
Hmm.
I started reading contemporary middle grade books, books that had been written in the last 5 or so years. Once I had these two critique partners, we got down to the real issues in my book. There was still some point of view. I mean, the point of view where I got rid of the adults, they were already gone. I mean, most of the adult points of view. But the point of view that I had was switching from character to character within a scene. And even though there's plenty of books that I've read since, like adult books mostly, it didn't work for middle grade books. And so I had to do yet another major rewrite to fix that. And that was heartbreaking, because, I would have these lines in the book where it's like one point of view, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have to get rid of that. Ah, it was really hard. And my way of writing is like, this is perfect. It's great. Let it sit for a week, read it again. Oh my gosh, I can't write. I'll never be a writer. I'll never get published. We all go through that. I've heard many other people say that. So I just kept feeling like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to query again. no, I'm not, And I did anyway, which is, like I said, I made a lot of mistakes in this journey, but I would not change a minute of it because my days were filled during the day with my PR work. And I love my PR work, but nothing brings me the kind of joy that working on Summer of Luck did. And even subsequently, I wrote a sequel already in a year as opposed to 20 years. And I'm working on my third, the sequel to that, because I have a 3-book deal with Intense Publications.
All right. So you got your critique partners, and at some point you did decide that you were ready to query for real, right?
Of all the Twitter contests that I entered, I got picked for one and got more feedback, and again revise. I mean, that particular contest was, I think it was the first 10 pages or something like that. But the first 10 pages are what's going to make an agent sit up and take notice. So it was really important to make sure that that was right. Once I got accepted or picked for that contest, I got put on a team of writers and they gave us feedback. And it was like the first time anybody in the writing community had liked my book enough to include me in something like that. That was super encouraging. I felt like I was finally kind of on the right path. I started querying again after that. Then I started getting requests. Instead of sending out 30 queries and getting either silence or this isn't for me, I was getting requests for either pages or sometimes full requests. And then the rejections would happen ultimately. And with that came more suggestions. So more rewrites. But again, I just kept learning and I kept making the book better. And I could see, wow, I can see why that didn't work. Look what I have now. So I knew that I was on the right track and I just wasn't quite there yet. The year before I signed my contract with Intense Publications, I was getting a lot of requests and I was really encouraged. And I had decided, because this journey had gone on for so long, I was going to query 100 agents. And when I finished that, if I didn't get an agent offer by then, which I never did, by the way, I was going to start querying small publishers directly. I had a friend who had written a middle grade book. She had been inspired by me, and she wrote the book way faster. She got an agent. The agent ultimately couldn't sell the book. So she went to a small publisher and her book was coming out. And I was like, how did that happen? I don't know. I kind of had this, I'm going to use the word antiquated, but it's not really antiquated. But the idea that if I didn't do it a certain way, then there was no value in it. There was no value in getting a book published if you didn't have an agent. And, people would say to me, friends would say, well, or who knew what self-publishing was, they would say, well, why don't you just publish it? You know, People want to read it. They had no clue about the industry, and how books are sold and anything like that. I just thought I have to do it the way it's supposed to be done, whatever that is. Ultimately, I came to a point. This is kind of a little bit of a thread that I want to run through my story. And that is that I had to look at why I was so hesitant to do it a little bit differently. And I kind of realized that I was afraid to not go the route of traditionally published, agented, published, because I was afraid of my parents' criticism. And I didn't realize that until somebody asked me, why? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And when I thought about it and I realized that was the problem, I was like, oh, that doesn't matter, And that freed me. That freed me so that I said, okay, I'm going to query 100 agents. I'm going to give it one last shake. And if I don't get any yeses, I'm going to start querying small publishers. That's what I did. I had a lot of success with getting requests. I think I had 5 full requests. I can't remember the exact number. And I had maybe 5 more for pages. And I had to wait. I didn't query all 100 at a time. I did 3 a week or 5 a week or something like that. And then just when I would think, okay, I've given these agents enough time to either respond or to know that they weren't going to respond, I would get a response and then I'd have to wait 3 more months. I had one agent that first asked me for 10 pages, then she wanted 50, then she wanted the full. And I thought, I've never gotten that far. This is going to be it, right? And it wasn't, because she ultimately rejected me. And the day she rejected me, my first reaction was like, I'm a failure. I can't write. I'm never going to get published. And then, within 15 minutes, I have alternatives. I'm going to keep going. During those last 3 months, I started researching small publishers and I found a list. I think I had about 18. I had my list already. I researched each one of them. I looked up, you do all the things that I had already learned to do, like check out Write Mentor and see if they were mentioned there, or, do a Google search. And I felt really confident at that point. I felt like I'm taking my writing career into my own hands as much as I can, and I'm going to take the next step. I didn't know where I was going to end up at that point. So October 1st, I had 18 names on my publisher's list. I sent out 6 queries the first week. And I sent out 6 queries the second week, and I sent out 6 the third. And I started getting requests for fulls immediately. Some of the publishers on that list wanted your entire, the full to begin with. I think the 4th week, maybe, I got an email one morning from Intense Publications. I saw it in my email and I was like, oh, another rejection. And I opened it up. It was a yes. And not only was it a yes, but the publisher said, I love this and I want to publish it. And would you be interested in doing 2 sequels? Because I had said it had series potential, and it was always sort of my idea that there would be more books. And I was stunned. I was looking at my phone, and I walked into the living room with tears in my eyes, and my husband's like, what's wrong? I knew that even if all the other publishers ended up rejecting me, because I had had some requests at that point, I had one yes. I wrote her back and I asked for the phone call. I was going to do due diligence. I wasn't just going to say, yes, whatever, I'll sign my life away. I wasn't going to do that. I had a phone call with her. I found out all the things I needed to know. Since I didn't have an agent, I joined the Authors Guild, which offers members the opportunity to have their contracts reviewed by an attorney who knows the writing business. She had offered to give me some names of the other authors that were part of the Intense Publications family, but I had already contacted one via Twitter, and I had a conversation with him to find out what it was like to have a book deal with Intense. And it was all good. It was all good. I mean, Intense is a very, very small publisher. I went into it with my eyes open as to how much of the work that I would have to do on publicity and marketing. Guess what? I am a publicist. I don't do book publicity. I didn't really know anything about that, but I know how to promote, I know how to publicize, and I know how to make the most of what I'm working with. So that has served me very well. So I signed my contract, and it was a thrill. It was a thrill after 20 years of working really hard to make my book good enough for somebody to want to publish. And, if you compare the first draft of Summer of Luck to what it is today, I mean, it would be laughable. But even I would say probably a version that was 2 or 3 years old, again, it wasn't ready. One of the agents who looked at it, she said to me, in her feedback, I'm not comfortable with the way that The character of Darby, she stopped stuttering at the end of the book. That was my original ending. And she said, that I don't like that. That doesn't work at all. So what I realized was, just like in my own experience with my mom and my family, it wasn't that I changed and all of a sudden then I was okay. It was that I learned to accept myself just the way that I was. And it didn't matter as much what my parents thought.
It's funny because that had been your theme from the beginning, right? The journey to self acceptance. But even in the ending that you wrote, you were going against your own theme.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? That's why all this input was gold to me. All the time that it took, all the hard work that I put into querying and rewriting my query letter and rewriting the book, I'll never forget how much help I got through this journey. There's no way I would ever say that I could have done this by myself. I didn't get the Big Five publication deal, but I got my book in print and it's real and I wrote it, and I'm thrilled.
So, can you go ahead and read that successful query letter for us?
It starts off dear and then it was personalized. I'm seeking a publisher for Summer of Luck, my multi POV middle grade contemporary fantasy with series potential, complete at 45,000 words. The first 3 chapters are attached, or whatever I was attaching, whatever they requested. 11-year-old stuttering Darby believes she's supposed to be perfect, just like her mother demands. But summer away at Camp Inch promises temporary escape. There, she befriends fellow campers Justin and Naz, who have troubles of their own. Justin hasn't uttered a word since his dad died. Naz is struggling to learn English. When mysterious calliope music from a nearby warehouse grants the trio power to communicate without words, they sneak inside to find out why. After the abandoned building bursts into a full-size carnival with magical games and rides, they're greeted by the ghost of Leroy Usher, Carnival King, who can't rest until his property brings joy to children once again. He asks for their help, convincing his estranged sons and daughters to restore the carnival to its former glory before summer's end. In return, Mr. Usher promises he'll teach Darby, Justin, and Naz how to find their voices. Using an enchanted pocket watch, he sweeps them off on a series of midnight adventures. As the kids learn they're capable of accomplishing more than they ever imagined, they scheme to persuade the Usher siblings to bring the carnival back to life as part of Camp Inch instead of selling the property to developers. With each challenge they face, their confidence in communicating and in themselves grows. But when Darby's bunkmates trick her into taking a starring role in the camp's talent show, her budding confidence falters. If she can't risk being less than perfect by performing in the talent show and speaking up to Mr. Usher's resistant son, she'll put the carnival in danger and sabotage her most important quest to believe in herself, stutter and all. Summer of Luck's fantasy elements, diverse characters, and message about friendship are a great fit for trends shaping the children's book market. Its unique plot weaves an imaginative tale of 3 kids navigating their way to self acceptance with the help of a ghostly figure who inhabits an enchanted carnival. It will appeal to middle grade age boys and girls and their parents who loved You Go First by Aaron and Trotta Kelly, The Matchstick Castle by Keir Graff, and Sticks and Stones by Abby Cooper. Camp Inch's name comes from Disney's original movie, The Parent Trap. And then the letter concludes with the About Me section, which you basically read earlier. And then finally, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. So, how has your experience been since signing your contract through the book's release? Were there any surprises along the way?
being that my publisher was very small, sometimes it was really hard to get hold of them. Sometimes it was really slow getting a response. But I've heard that from people who have agents and have contracts with big publishers too. So I'm not sure that that is that unusual. I didn't like it. I still don't like it. I'd like things to happen at my speed, but life isn't like that. So
This is the quick round section of the podcast. I call it author DNA. So it's just this whole bunch of, things that we use to classify writers. And so I'm going to ask you which one you are, and you just give me your answer as quickly as you can. So are you a pantser or a plotter?
pantser,
Do you tend to overwrite or underwrite?
overwrite,
Are you more of a morning writer or a nighttime writer?
nighttime writer,
Whenever you start a story, do you usually start with character or plot or concept or something else?
character,
Do you prefer coffee or tea?
tea,
Oh no, Team T. Do you prefer silence or sound when writing?
sound, but only a very particular kind of sound.
What is that?
Classical music or baseball, Dodger baseball. I can't explain that, but yeah, if a Dodger game is on and I'm writing, I'm listening to that too.
When it comes to writing the first draft, are you more of a get it down kind of person or a get it right kind of person?
Get it right.
What tools or software do you use to draft?
Microsoft Word and pen and paper.
Do you prefer drafting or revising more?
Revising. It's easier.
Do you write in sequential order or do you hop around?
Sequential order.
The show is called Queries, Qualms, and Quirks. We already had you read your query, and now we're going to get into that second Q. What were some of the worries that you had on your journey, and were they realized, or did you overcome them, or how did they shake out?
Because I'd been working on Summer of Luck for so long that I aged 20 years during that time, and I was already not a young person to begin with. I was worried I'd run out of time, which is why ultimately I did make a decision to going to small publishers or some other decision. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. To take rejection or to take negative comments to heart is something that's going to put up a block in my way. I just wanted to keep going. And I believed in my story and I believed in my characters and I believed in Summer of Luck, and I never gave up.
Now we're going to talk about the third Q. Do you have any writing quirks? Is there anything about your writing process that you think is interesting or unique besides listening to baseball when you write?
One of the things that happens to me that, again, is very common in writers, but it's this idea that if I can't make any progress on a given writing session on a given evening, then I will never make progress. I mean, that's what occurs to me. That's happened to me enough times, and then I stop and I come back the next night and all of a sudden the problem is solved. It's happened to me enough times that it's built into my sense memory. Every time it happens again, I despair briefly or for an evening, and then I just go back to it the next night and I don't give up. And I would check Twitter and I would check Facebook. That's a quirk. Checking social media is like, well, maybe if when I come back to that from checking social media, I'll have an idea.
No, that never works.
Yeah, not really.
When you were in the lowest parts of your journey, what kept you going and why did you stick to it?
I would see other writers who were, I had started to get to know, I saw people getting agents, getting book deals. I kept worrying, will this ever happen for me? That was a very low point, to sort of be at that place and have no solution to those kind of thoughts. What I ultimately did, every so often I would see something on Twitter. Like I remember this one writer who I think said she was in her 50s or something like that. And I'm even older than that. She got a book deal and she said, I've queried for years and I just got a book deal and there's no age limit to our dreams. I think she said something like that. And I was like, what? Okay. maybe that's something I should listen to instead of the thing that really brought me down. So I started making a collection of 31 affirmations to myself that were related to my writing career. And that was one of them. And one of them was Lady Gaga when she won her Oscar. People kept talking about her great acceptance speech. And so I listened to it on like YouTube or something. And there it was. She said, don't ever stop. It doesn't matter how many times you get rejected, how many times you get beaten down. What matters is that you get up and you keep going. Those kinds of things. So at the end, I had 31 days, I had a month's worth of affirmations, and every morning, if it was the first of the month, I would read number 1 and so on. And one of the things, because I have a spiritual life, and I kept praying, give me an answer, let me know what I should be doing. And all I kept hearing back on that was patience. Just keep going. Patience, just keep going. So that was another one of my affirmations. And those, just doing that every month for however many, I mean, I still read that every day, every single day. I read one thing from that list. But that kept me going. That was something that worked for me to continue to keep the faith and keep going in the direction, keep working, revise, or whatever I happen to be doing at the moment. That's how I maintained and kept believing in myself and kept believing that I would someday this could happen to me. That was another one of my affirmations, and it did.
Did you make any mistakes along your journey that you would like to share with listeners, maybe, helping them prevent making those mistakes for themselves?
I queried way too soon. I didn't know anything about the publishing business. I didn't know anything. Those were my two biggest mistakes. So, over time, I addressed those things by learning about the publishing business. I mean, you can't unquery someone you've already queried. If I had queried them maybe 10 years before, if you have a dream agent and you've queried them and they've rejected you, that's it, and on that particular project. So that was a big mistake on my part.
I have heard the last couple of years agents be a little more lenient about that, where they're saying if you've made a big revision, feel free to query them again. But I feel like if you asked 10 different agents that question, you might get 10 different answers. So who knows?
Another thing that I've learned just by paying as much attention as I can to what's happening in the publishing world, sometimes a book can be great and nobody buys it. I mean, even agented authors have had books that they've had to shelve because a publisher didn't buy it. And it's just because it wasn't the right book for the market at that point. I've learned that publishing is subjective too.
Can you share with listeners one of the most important lessons you learned on your journey to publication?
Never give up, connect with other writers. Those are the two most important things that I learned. When I started connecting with other writers and got critique partners, we were reading each other's work and giving feedback on very detailed level. That was the best thing that ever happened to me on this journey.
This is what I like to call the acknowledgments portion of the podcast. This is not a business most of us succeed in completely on our own. You've mentioned several people while we were recording, but do you want to give a shout out to anyone else or any other organization or anything who kind of helped you along your way?
My critique partner, whose name is Layla, I just want to give her a shout out. She's the one who's still with me several years later, 3 or 4 years later. She is like my guardian angel. Summer of Luck would never have been published without her. My husband, who kept telling me, I believe in you, that was gold. I mentioned bloggers like agent Janet Reed and Janice Hardy, just the writers who took the time to give me feedback. I see them on Twitter. I'm sure they don't even remember that they did that, but I'll never forget them. Once I had my publishing deal, I joined a Facebook group of debut writers for 2020. They helped me immeasurably. I mean, just to kind of get ready for publication. And I also just want to go back to the idea of, mentioning my parents. When I got my deal, Intense Publications, I love them. They made my dream come true. I have nothing bad to say about them at all. But it wasn't a big 5 publisher. It wasn't, I didn't have an agent. And my parents at this point were in their 90s. I told them that I got a publishing deal, that my book was going to be published. And instead of asking me, have you had your contract reviewed? Have you this and that? What's the money like? They didn't do any of that. They were thrilled. It was shocking to me after growing up with a lot of criticism. And they were joyful. They couldn't wait. And my book came out last September. And my dad passed away a month later. But he saw it. He saw the book. He was thrilled. And my mom passed away last week. And I was telling her about a week before she died about how I was telling my author story to a classroom of kids. And she said, I am so proud of you. So my journey, which came from a challenging childhood, as most of us have, and even a challenging adulthood until I learned to be able to detach from my parents' supposed criticism of me. But in the end, the story of love and family, I got to not only have the intense joy, or that funny word to choose, but the great joy of having my book published and holding it in my hands and opening it up and reading it to someone or seeing people buy it. Not only that, but I got this sort of beautiful closure with my parents.
You read your query for us, so we know quite a bit about Summer of Luck, but is there anything else that you want to share with us or the listeners about that book and its sequel if they're interested in checking it out?
Summer of Luck is a lot about friendship, about 3 kids who are isolated and feel all alone. When they come to this summer camp and they meet each other and they discover this magical power to hear each other's thoughts, they go on a journey together that involves a lot of magic and magical adventures, and they learn how to find their voices. But the story is grounded, and the discoveries that they make and the changes that happen to them are grounded in reality. It's not like someone waves a magic wand and says, okay, you're fixed. Summer of Luck 2 is a little bit of a different book. It's the point of view of Justin. He's really struggling. He's struggling with a bully, and he's struggling with a friend who gets mad at him and stops talking to him. And he's pretty upset that the world seems so unfair.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Queries, Qualms, and Quirks. You can find the text of Laura's query in the show notes, along with links to find out more about her and her books. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, tell your friends, or share this episode on social media. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/pubtalklive. And if you're a published author interested in being a guest on the show, please click on the home base link in the description or go to sarahnicolas.com and click on the podcast logo in the sidebar. That's Sarah with an H and Nicolas with no H. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.